YouTube. Today we are going head to head with the iPhone 14 Pro Max versus the Galaxy Z Fold 4 from Samsung. Oh, it's about to go down. Now, although these two devices are in technically two different leads, they're still sharing a similar market, because at the end of the day, the foldable market is looking to one day intersect with the everyday smartphone market. And without a doubt, I'm sure Samsung would love to be able to sell as many foldable devices as everyday smartphone devices. It's an emerging market and it's very innovative, and I'm excited for the foldable phone market. With that being said, let's put the iPhone 14 Pro Max up against the Galaxy Z Fold 4. All right, the first place we're gonna start off with is design, build quality, weight, and dimensions. So when it comes to the category of weight, the Z Fold 4 is a hefty 263 grams versus the hefty 240 grams of the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So two big devices. Now putting them side by side is kind of, well, technically the iPhone 14 Pro Max is a bit taller, but the Z Fold 4 is definitely the thicker device. All right, let's take a physical look at the 14 Pro Max and the Z Fold 4. As you can see, almost identical in height. Obviously, the width and screen real estate is going to be wider and more apparent on the 14 Pro Max. The thickness, almost like having two of these, almost. And then we got the rear. Now, from a width standpoint and gripability and usability right here, it's gonna be easier one-handed on the Z Fold 4. But there's also this aspect to it, which is totally different. And that's the plus to this. It kind of creates like a weird segment, because where else can you get two displays in one device versus the typical everyday just one display? Literally, you have a front display on this bad boy and an unfolded one. So the size and the weight and the build of the Z Fold 4 is kind of warranted due to the technology and innovation of this device. It's quite the innovative smartphone of today, and I enjoy that. It's very exciting. Premium designs. This is the iPhone 14 Pro Max in gold, and this is the Z Fold 4 in beige, yet they look very much similar. Very similar. And obviously, the stainless steel sides on the 14 Pro Max are way more gold versus this. I'm not sure what tone this stainless steel is on the Z Fold 4, but nevertheless, these both look very good and are built extremely well. Now, with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you have our typical IP68 dust and water resistance, but that's different on the Z Fold 4 because you only get IP, was it like X6? Basically, you get water resistance, but no dust resistance. And that's a scary thing, considering the fact that dust is everywhere. Dust is like something that you don't even see until it's just all caked up on your monitor and on your phone and anywhere where you haven't dusted yet. Dust is crazy. So no dust resistance on the Z Fold 4. So you have to keep that in mind from a durability and usability standpoint versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which has that dust resistance and water resistant rating. So something to keep in mind. Consider it. And of course, for payment options, they both have their own versions. You have Samsung Pay, or I think you can do Google Pay as well with the Z Fold 4, and then you have the infamous Apple Pay. So either way you go, they're both really good. They both run on NFC. So long to the MST, unfortunately, with Samsung, because when Samsung had MST, they were goated as the payment option. But now that they're on the same wavelength as Apple, I mean, you know, it's tit for tat. Yeah. All right, next up, always on displays. Not the camera, but always on display, you guys. So I'm not the biggest fan. Hold on, let me get it on there. I'm not the biggest fan of Apple's always on display in comparison to what we know was tried and true with Samsung's always on display. It's completely black. It's using the least amount of battery. All those pixels are off. On OLED displays, when you have black, the pixels turn off, which is the best for battery. Now, in Apple's use case, they leave a lot of pixels on. Now, yes, they dim them, but I don't think they dim them enough. This is Apple's interpretation of always on display. I love the UI. I love the information. I think it's absolutely fire. The fact that I can see some of the top tech stocks at the peak. I can see the battery on my AirPods Max, as well as the weather, time, and date. Who wouldn't want that at the peak of an eye? Also, you get a full visual of your notifications. It's a lot bigger, a lot more apparent, but it's also very bright. This always on display is a lot more subtle, a lot less drawing on battery. And I just think, you know, yes, it's minimal. Yes, it doesn't have that pop that Apple's going for, but it's tried and true. Let's talk about display. Well, obviously, when we get into displays, there's multiple to discuss. Because on the Z Fold 4, you have 2, and on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you just have this 1. With the front display, I'll say this, the peak brightness is actually really good. Honestly, the front display on the Z Fold 4 is really good in direct sunlight. I'm very, very surprised and blown away by it. I'm not gonna lie. Now, the difference is when you go to this inner display, not so much. The iPhone definitely is by far, technically and visually. When I was outside in direct sunlight against this 2000 nit iPhone 14 Pro Max, the front display on this Z Fold 4 held its own like no other. It was super fire. Now, on my S22 Ultra, I had to turn on higher brightness. And, Samsung, why are you advertising features that people have to turn on and they're not being delivered with those devices? And I think it's done to mask the battery, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's a couple things on that. Anyways, back to displays. As far as the front display on the Z Fold 4, we are being given a 120 Hertz OLED, AMOLED, shall I say, 6.2-inch display with 904 by 2316 pixels. It's a 23 by 1.9 ratio, which creates like a different experience. Thankfully, on the Z Fold 4, it has increased in width and sizing, which has made it a better experience from the previous generation of the Z Fold 3. Now, on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, one and single and only display in the front, we are being given a 6.7-inch 1290 by 2796 pixel display with 460 ppi density. Now, that's the main display that you get on the 14 Pro Max. Let's talk about the main display of the Z Fold 4, and obviously I need 2 hands for that. Boom. The big boy. Woo! This is what you get the Z Fold 4 for. Absolutely. Now, this display is a 7.6-inch dynamic AMOLED 120 Hertz HDR10 Plus with a 1200 nit peak brightness. I may have forgotten to mention that the iPhone 14 Pro Max comes with a 2000 nit max peak brightness, which is next level and unheard of until the iPhone. Here's the thing. With this display, you're being given a 1812 by 2176 pixel with a 373 pixel density. So it's not as pixel dense as the iPhone 14 Pro display is. Wait, let me switch hands because you gotta maintain uniformity, but it's still that beautiful Samsung display that we love to enjoy. The only thing I will say about this display is the aspect ratio. When it comes to looking at content and watching, the only thing about the Z Fold 4, which I've brought this up in other videos, is aspect ratios. The viewing experience is going to be better on here because the aspect ratio is something that we're used to, and it's more normal. It's not so normal on here. And then this is going to be the more accurate display as far as colors and P3 gamuts and things like that. But Samsung has that more vibrant, saturated pop type of display. So a lot of times the Samsung displays appear better and are more visually pleasing to the masses. So, you know, you pick your poison when it comes to the displays on these, and you go with what you want. Obviously, you get two for ones special on displays on the Z Fold 4 versus just the one on the 14 Pro. But it's the more balanced, more normal aspect ratio, because when you get in here on this bigger display, the aspect ratios can get funky. When it comes to like watching videos, this is the better display. It's just more usual and comforting. This is traditional all of our content lines up with this perfectly. Now, content on the Z Fold 4, a lot of it does line up well, but not enough. And you get this weird aspect ratio, which is beautiful for pages, reading books, doing business, reading PDFs, documents, being a productivity hog, which is what this device is. This device is definitely for productivity, but there's also the luxury of media. A lot of things line up on this Z Fold display a little bit more awkward than I would like it to, and I just think that's because we're in the new evolution period of foldable devices, and not every developer, not even Android, is fully all the way on board. They're working on it. So it's a development in progress. But let's keep it simple. As far as these displays go, I don't think you could go wrong either way. Just something to consider. And you get 2 displays on the Z Fold 4 versus the 1 on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So do the math and figure out which one is better for you. All right, next up, performance. These both have the latest chips and processors of their platform. Apple A16 Bionic chip on the iPhone 14 Pro Max versus the Snapdragon 8 Plus. It's a fire chip, and it's the Gen 1 of that chip, and it actually has finally brought ideal optimization and battery life, at least a future for it, in this platform. On Samsung, we all know you either get Exynos or you get Snapdragon. I'm in the Americas, so I get the Snapdragon. There are other people in other countries that get the Exynos version, and I always hear like mixed reviews about Exynos versus Snapdragon and so forth. So keep that in mind when you are considering picking up a Samsung device, depending on where you are located. Furthermore, as far as performance goes, either way you go, you're gonna get a brilliant and effective performance. Now, when it comes to optimization, obviously that area is always like pretty synonymous with iPhones. They're very well optimized due to Apple controlling so much of the hardware and production. They're able to pull a little bit more of optimization and power out of their chips because they control the whole entire process. And, you know, for some people, it's a W. For some people, they don't like it because there is that word control. All right, let's talk about the dreaded and most controversial topic that we could typically talk about when doing smartphones is battery life. Battery life is 100,000% subjective to the user, their settings, and how they use their device. But it can be easily gathered that the iPhone 14 Pro Max has the best battery out of the 2. I will say this, the Galaxy Z Fold 4, the battery life has improved over the previous generation, and that's absolutely a plus. A lot of people weren't as satisfied with the Z Fold 3 battery life, but we have an improvement, as I said, due to the platform and the optimization in this generation of the Z Fold 4, which is absolutely promising. But from a technical sense, the battery sizing is about the same. Literally, it's so close. It's 4,323 milliamp hours on the iPhone 14 Pro Max versus 4,400 milliamp hours on the Z Fold 4. So not much of a difference in battery size. The biggest difference is optimization. Now, for our next category of discussion, which is going to be cameras, we can take this outside. All right, here we have it, you guys. We got the Galaxy Z Fold 4 front-facing camera versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max's front-facing camera. You know, it's hard for me to tell just looking at the viewfinders because they always make it look so good in the viewfinder, but the truth always comes out when you get to the computer. So I'm gonna need you guys to hit the comment section down below and let me know which front-facing camera is looking better right now, because I can't tell. Now, I love the rear camera because it's always the better quality. And here we have the rear wide-angle camera, the iPhone 14 Pro Max's new and improved 48 megapixel rear facing camera. And then we have the Z Fold 4 new and improved high megapixel rear facing camera. Baby, which one is looking better? Because I can't see anything. Although with the Z Fold 4, I could, if I want to, unfold this thing and be able to see myself, which is a plus. I think as content creators, it's just not as convenient because once you unfold the Z Fold 4, holding it and gripping it and being safe becomes the challenge. But nevertheless, here's the rear wide angle lenses on both of these cameras. Let me know, is it the 14 Pro Max or is it the Z Fold 4? Comment down below. All right, players, we have one of my favorite cameras, the ultra wide, what I like to call the vlogging lens of the smartphones, because you know, you get that nice wide angle vlogging get down. This is Z Fold 4. You're looking at a player. And then we go over to the 14 Pro Max ultra wide. Now this lens doesn't always get the most attention per se, but nevertheless, this is that vlogging lens. Let me know, Z Fold 4 or iPhone 14 Pro Max, what team are you? All right, this is that zoom lens. Here we go. Which zoom lens, 3x zoom lens, is looking better? Which one has the better slide look? You know, it's hard for me to tell. You let me know. Real quick, comment down below which camera on which device you found to be better. I personally would love for the Z Fold 4 camera system to become the same as the S22's Ultra's camera system. This is the most expensive device being sold by Samsung. I get it, we're paying for the technology, the innovation. It literally has 2 displays and one of them folds. I get it, but at that price point, I want these cameras. And I don't care what it takes for me to get these cameras on this device. Make it happen, Samsung, please. Now, for the most important and the most necessary topic of discussion, user experience. This is the one that matters most, and this is the one I think a lot of creators kind of skip over, and actually, I don't think they emphasize enough in their reviews or discussions. User experience is everything. It's the combination of all of these categories that I spoke of, components and parts, design elements, and so forth. What is the user experience when you, the consumer, take this device home to become your everyday smartphone? I'll start here. Let's talk about the Z Fold 4. It's literally innovation in my hands. I am folding a glass display. I know y'all be on me about the way I say display. Hey, I gotta be me. As you can see, a beautiful, large, voluptuous inside folding panel. I love it. I enjoy the user experience on this. I enjoy typing with 2 thumbs. I enjoy being able to see everything in this full array of display. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me stop. But literally, having this in your pocket is clutch. And being able to just handle those quick need-to-dos on this front panel, but not without, you know, some caveats. It's a lot thicker than your typical smartphone. It's heavier, just a little bit more to carry, but it's the world that you subject yourself to if you love big displays, if you love like small tablets, and if you wish that you can have a small tablet as your everyday phone, they have this, the Galaxy Z Fold 4, which is absolutely an experience that I think at some point everyone should experience and hopefully will. It is priced pretty heavy and it is not the norm. So it's gonna take some, you know, adjustment and adapting to get into. But for some people, for a lot of people, especially us Galaxy Note users, once a Note user, always a Note user, this kind of fell in line with those type of people because this is a productivity focused device and I love it for that. This is the ideal business phone. With that being said, we come to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. Has a great, typical, and usual user experience. If you used iPhones over the most recent years or over the even previous long years, it's a familiar experience. For some, it's not so good and not desirable, and for many, that's what makes the iPhone 14 Pro Max and previous iPhones and many other iPhones, their user experience ideal. People are able to pick up an iPhone no matter what year, what version, and they're able to find their way around because it's all familiar territory. It's also one of the platforms that is the most optimized. This 14 Pro Max has the best flagship battery of any flagship that I've ever tested and used. Gotta appreciate that. So battery life becomes less of an concern. Like I don't charge my devices overnight. As you can see, I'm at 24. I just wait until it gets really low and then I charge it. But I'm typically just bouncing around carefree on battery. And I love that about that from a user experience perspective. Premium build, you know, both of these have that. I think when it comes to Apple, a big selling point for user experience, for those who are willing to subject themselves to it, which Samsung has one as well that's in development, is the ecosystem. pairing an Apple Watch with this. Now, Samsung has their Galaxy Watch 5 Pro, not to be slept on, an absolute beast. You pair that with your Fold 4, you're in a similar territory. They both have tablets, so you get your iPad, and they're all talking to each other. But you can take it even further and get Apple TV, and you can have a remote on your phone and control your television now. Also, there's the Apple computer. Samsung, I see you guys moving in the direction of building PCs and so forth. Samsung is working on developing their answer to Apple's ecosystem as well. But Apple computers, you know, my watch can unlock my Apple computer when I walk up to it without me having to do anything or enter any passwords. I can pay with Apple Pay with my phone, but now that we have Touch ID on the computer, you can do that. But in the past, or sometimes you can just use your phone, double tap, Face ID, boom. The ecosystem is just all inclusive, and it's a great way of having a combination of tech that all speaks to each other. Now, where was I? YouTube, before I was rudely interrupted. The ecosystem. I just think it's cool. Some people feel like it locks you in more into dealing with Apple more because you have so many products, so then you don't want to leave, and there's more friction against you wanting to switch ecosystems. Absolutely true. It definitely does that. So, you know, from a user experience standpoint on these devices, I always say it's definitely preference. Preference is the #1 deciding factor as to what will work for you as a consumer, what has more of, or if not, a better iteration of what you need. That's always the focus. Never, ever pick because of the noise. You ignore the noise of social media and brand loyalists, and you pick exactly what personally services your needs. It's as simple as that. Wait. Don't you go anywhere without hitting that subscribe button and hitting the bell. When you subscribe, if you don't hit the bell, it's not the same, and you're not actually subscribing because you can miss all of this brutally honest tech content. And you wouldn't want that to happen, would you?